To build a sport or to build a Rubicon? That is the question. William Shakespeare. My name is Neil with SFJ 4x4 Simpson Family Jeeps. Today, we're going to break down one of the most common questions that we have been receiving a lot of recently, and that is what trim package Jeep an individual should start with. This is a conversation that's reasonably happening within the last 20 years or so, and it has everything to do with the emergence of the Rubicon model in 2003. And while a lot of this is going to be about newer model Jeeps, it really is kind of a broad conversation about how people go about embracing the build culture that is the Jeep community. Now, it's important to note that the Jeep brand and the folks at the highest levels of Stellantis recognize how much Jeepers love the uniqueness of their particular vehicle. And so Jeep attempts to reach across the aisle and give us a bunch of factory options to best meet our needs. So much so that the Jeep Wrangler is among one of the last remaining vehicles that you can still get a manual transmission and a 4x4 married together. So Jeep is very aware of the factors that make us uniquely us, and they try to give us these different factory options, and they differentiate them in this kind of umbrella of trim packages, kind of something to meet everyone's need approach. Now, this conversation is going to be a lot about the later model Wranglers and Gladiators, and so I'm going to draw upon the most recent trim packages of the Sport, Sport S, Willys, Sahara, Mojave, and Rubicon, and understand that amongst those lines, you can still have a bunch of different options that sometimes almost don't even make sense. Throughout history of the automotive industry, typically trim packages are thought of as paint, sticker, and interior options that help set the same model apart from their similar counterparts on the dealer lot. Jeep took it one step further and have differentiated the models with different drivetrain, axle, and lift options as well. So today's goal is to tell you my answer about my preferred platform to start with when building a vehicle, whether the Rubicon really is the most off-road capable vehicle for you, and a few key factors for you when deciding which vehicle you might want to start with. Like I mentioned, there's a bunch of different umbrella trim levels for you to choose from when pursuing a Wrangler or a Gladiator. And realistically, for the point of this conversation, we're going to focus on the Sport and Sport S over here and the more advanced or elaborate options of the Rubicon over here. Yes, the Willys and the Sahara and the Mojave have an onslaught of desirable features, but realistically, the vast majority of people watching and commenting our videos or calling into our facility are specifically asking about a base model versus the more accessorized and outfitted Rubicon. So the idea around a Sport or Sport S trim level Jeep is that you can get a low cost of entry from a platform that has a lot of aftermarket options available for it, and you can incrementally build as you see fit. Not only does the Sport or base model have a desirable low price point, but the Sport S model actually has just enough bells and whistles to even satisfy some of the pickiest Jeep owners. It's an affordable cost of entry, and it gives you enough off-road components that ensure that you will have a good time when you decide to stretch the legs of your Jeep off-road. Now, contrast this with the highest end trim model that Jeep offers as the Rubicon package. Now, amongst the Rubicon umbrella, you actually have the Rubicon X, the Rubicon Extreme, and the Rubicon Recon Extreme. And so there is a myriad of options available under that platform as well. Since 2003, the Rubicon is set apart from its physically similar counterparts because it offers an upgraded transfer case, deeper gear ratio within the Dana 44 front and rear axles, and by later standards, electronic sway bar disconnect. The mothership Stellantis takes this one step further by offering lots of bells and whistles, oftentimes leather interiors and a fun contrast color dash, just to really let people know and appreciate the fact that they have this highly desirable off-road rig. For all intents and purposes, a Rubicon model Wrangler or Gladiator is hands down, dollar for dollar, the best off-road vehicle off a production line ever made. The components installed at the factory set this particular trim level apart in the sense that the quality and the comprehensive engineering to make everything work well together is flat out the best. So it's easy to understand why somebody thinking that they may want to go off-road in the future would ideally gravitate towards the Rubicon, simply because they understand that they are bringing the best of the best, simply because the whole point of this vehicle being made was for you to explore and head off-road. So realistically, it comes as no surprise that so many people who are getting into Jeeping or have kind of dabbled in some of the other models now are asking, what should I start with as far as a platform for me to build upon and eventually make all of my dreams come true? Now, like so many things, I believe that this is a deeply personal question and it is an individualized one. While I absolutely have a bias and I'll share with you what that is here in a moment, I will say that initially gravitating towards a Rubicon makes a lot of sense. Now, I do have a lot of reservation when it comes to how the Rubicon is marketed and initially sold at the dealership level. I find a lot of almost predatory practices out of salespeople who kind of hard sell or push the attributes of the Rubicon as being kind of the only thing that matters if somebody would like to go off-road. And if you're only ever going to drive on the road, then one of the other models, Sport, Willys, or Sahara, is what you should be doing. I have encountered many people who have never off-roaded in their life, but express just an iota of interest, and therefore salespeople glom onto that and push the hard sell of the Rubicon. I will absolutely admit that the Rubicon also fills a void of Jeep ownership as a status symbol. And ultimately, as I've said plenty of times, if your objective is to own a Rubicon for the purposes of status alone, I support you. However, I really think that that is unnecessary. And for a vast number of people who enter Jeep ownership at the Rubicon level, there is a lot of aspects of that vehicle that are either lost on them or actually sets them up for failure in the future when off-roading. What I mean by that is that you could get a unqualified individual behind the wheel of a highly qualified vehicle. And simply because the vehicle is so proficient, it can actually give you a false sense of accomplishment and safety in situations where driver skill and awareness might need to be more developed in order to actually accomplish or overcome an off-road obstacle. Sometimes when we have not had an opportunity to develop ourselves as drivers, our overqualified vehicles can potentially get us into situations we're not prepared to address. Ultimately, when deciding whether or not a base sport or a Rubicon is desirable for you, we have to take into consideration budget, longevity, and your user expectation. Rubicon models tend to tip the scales roughly $15,000 more via their MSRP. Initially, budget-conscious shoppers might gravitate towards a lesser price point simply because that's what they have immediately available. While hands down, the Rubicon is better because of its robust 4-to-1 transfer case, lockers, Dana 44 axles front and rear, and its highly integrated electronic stability and electronic sway bar disconnect. It does, however, share a lot of other quality attributes with the base model Jeeps. So I understand how tempting it might be to blow your budget or to seek out that unicorn price point used Rubicon to start your build with. But for the vast majority of individuals who are looking at the convenience of purchasing and maintaining a low monthly payment, starting with something that is potentially less off-road qualified might be more desirable. Now, honestly, here's my bias and my personal hot take on this. First, you have to understand my perspective. I currently own a Rubicon JK Wrangler, but my advice to anybody who is specifically interested in building a project is actually to start with a Sport or Sport S Wrangler or Gladiator platform, because the Jeep aftermarket has incredible aftermarket options available to meet so many people's different needs. I am a firm believer that you should get into your off-road experience and learn and grow along with your rig. I love being a fly on the wall of people's adventure of learning and building and growing with the capabilities of their vehicle. Since the start of the JK and the spin-free technology that is their independent braking system, bone stock Jeeps since 2007 have been more prolific and functional in an off-road capacity than any point in history. You can take a bone stock Jeep JK, JL, or JT and do what CJ and other older Jeep model owners only could have dreamed of. So because I'm a relatively budget conscious individual, I like to encourage other people to grow with their vehicle and invest consciously in how they build their off-road rig. With that said, virtually all components that make a Rubicon unique can be added at a later date to your base model Wrangler Gladiator platforms. Transfer cases, axles, gearing. There's a multitude of options to meet so many people's needs. Now, I've heard the conversation online that if you're only ever going to max out at a 35-inch tire, that ultimately a Rubicon Jeep is the best platform to start with, simply because everything is there and done. However, if you are an individual who thinks you're going to continue to push the bounds of your and your vehicle's abilities, then you would be better off entering your ownership at a lower price point and investing as your budget permitted. Now, there is a caveat to this in the sense that Rubicon model Jeeps are almost always going to retain a better resale value, and it's widely accepted that aftermarket alternatives depreciate and or have almost no resale value when it comes to traditional means. Now, I understand that not everybody is uniquely qualified to build their Jeep themselves and outfit it exactly as they want with their own two hands, but the increase in manufacturing precision and efficiency that's been the last 20 years or so really means that there's a lot of qualified shops and local off-road enthusiasts who are typically willing to assist you in your journey. Thanks to programs like the Dana Ultimate Axle series, you can arguably buy bolt-in ready 1-ton axles coupled with a quality lift kit. You can roll into the garage on stock tires and roll out on 40s or bigger. It's an awesome time to be involved in the Jeep and off-road industry because there are so many options to make people's off-road dreams come true. Additionally, if you're an individual who doesn't necessarily need to go to tons, you can actually get into a set of Rubicon axles for fairly cheap by comparison to building the less desirable axles under your Sport or Sport S. And so there's a multitude of options available, whether or not you are choosing to use production aftermarket parts or gently used takeoff parts. Jeep Wrangler and Gladiator models have such uniformity amongst their body and frame options that it makes them really desirable to mix and match to kind of achieve the best possible combination of parts to suit your needs. So while some parts and pieces may be a little more expensive or a little harder to source than others, realistically, you should be able to replace just about every part on your Jeep and make it as good, if not better, than a factory-equipped Rubicon. So in short, my recommendation for the vast majority of individuals who don't need the status symbol Rubicon in their driveway is in fact to purchase the lowest price point model that makes the most sense to your needs. If you like power options and just enough doodads and whiz bangs as far as luxury items in your Jeep are concerned, a Sport S with the cold weather group might be for you. From there, call your local off-road shop, your best buddy who drives a really gnarly Jeep, or consult one of your local clubs and start to gather bits and pieces to help bring your build to fruition. While I am thankful for what the Rubicon and Jeep engineers have done for our industry as a whole, I also recognize that it's not necessarily something that the vast majority of Jeep owners have to have. It absolutely has advantages when it comes to kind of the set it and forget it experience, in the sense that you can just buy it once and move on with life and be able to tackle the majority of mild and even some wild off-road obstacles. However, if distinct customization and progressive, budget-minded building are important to you, I absolutely love the idea of initially buying low and building over time. I recognize that this was a relatively broad and generalized perspective, but this is my advice that I would give to you if you called into our facility. And I wanted to take a moment and share that with folks because we practice what we preach. There's been a number of times that I have shared this advice with people and they are a little surprised because it is slightly contrary to what they've heard on the interwebs and certainly from the salespeople pushing these higher level packages. While I think there is absolutely a time for a 392 Rubicon, I also can recognize it's not for everybody. That same rugged individualism that bonds us together as Jeep enthusiasts spills over into our build culture, and our ability to share information and kind of come together as a community is better than almost any other automotive or mechanical community out there. So take advantage of that and endeavor into a build process that is specifically yours. So you guys have heard my approach and opinion that I professionally share to our customers and obviously our YouTube family alike. I'd love to know what advice you would give to somebody asking the same question. Maybe you're an individual who bought the Rubicon on purpose, or maybe you bought the Sport Stripper package. I would love to know and hear your approach in the comments below. As I mentioned before, we've had an explosion on our channel, and there's been a bunch of you who are new to the SFJ 4x4 brand and our YouTube channel. So make sure you take a moment to find us on all of our social pages. And like I said before, head over to sfj4x4.com to check out what's going on over there. If you haven't yet liked and subscribed, do that now so that you can get notified about other awesome Jeep and off-road content in the future. Until next time, Jeep on.